Today on Tricro Studios, we take a look at the Boss FS-5L latching foot switch and the Boss FS-5U unlatching foot switch. So before we get started, I want to let you know that we're only going to be talking and discussing product compatibility with Boss and Roland products. As well, we will not be discussing products other than guitar and bass floor units, which means we will not be talking about rack units, tabletop processors, backing rhythm and recorders, mixers, home studios, or drums and everything else in between. And the reason for that is because this video is already so long. We didn't want to make anything any longer than what we already have here. So we condensed it down just to floor pedal modules and what you could do with it with these foot switches. Also, with that being said, I've gone through hundreds and hundreds of manuals in the last week and a half. Today's date is March 19th, 2023. If there's new things that have come out since this date, it's not going to be in this list, obviously. But if something has come out, I'll try to include that in the next videos like the FS-6 or FS-7. Also, let me know if I've had any information wrong in this video. I will make sure it's updated in the description below. As well, I do want to mention that if in the manual for that particular unit, it doesn't specify that you can use either the FS-5L or the FS-5U, I did not include it as a definite of that unit would be controlled by. It was completely left out. So you may find in this review that some of the units that I'm particularly talking about in the FS-5U column, you can actually use a 5L, but where it wasn't shown in the manual itself, I did not include it. So throw that in the comments if you do use a 5L for a particular unit that I've talked about using 5U for, and so on. So let's look at the Boss FS-5L latching foot switch. Like the other foot switch, it has a metal construction. This one's black, the other one is silver for the Momentary. You have a hard plastic trigger here and then a rubber bottom. With this pedal, what the latching foot switch will do is it allows you to step on the pedal and it will stay on until you deselect the pedal. So once you put a cord, a normal TS jack into this pedal, once you step on it, your light will illuminate, and then when you step off, the pedal will turn off. The Momentary or unlatching does the complete opposite of that and does not showcase an LED. Now, with this pedal, if the problem that you might find with this, so you have to be really cautious, is there is no power supply in with this pedal, and it is powered by 2 AAA batteries. So you got to make sure that you unplug this pedal after use, or you're going to drain the battery for that LED. It will still work without the LED, but just be cautious that you're not going to burn out so many batteries so quick. Moving on now, we have our input jack here, which will go using a TS jack into whatever desired effect that you're using that this pedal is going to be efficient for. And we have a polarity switch. So for instance, 2 examples of what this pedal works with is the Boss Angry Driver and the Boss Turbo Distortion. These 2 pedals, what it does is once you plug in from here to the remote function, it's going to allow you to turn on that secondary distortion or boost setting. So if you plug this pedal in and you find that, okay, I want the LED lit up on the other setting, not this setting, you just have to move this polarity switch. It's going to change when the LED will be active and not active. So here is a grand list of all the pedals and effects that Boss has that I could currently find as of this date that this pedal will work with. So the first pedal series we're going to talk about here is the Boss Compact Pedal Series. Looking at the 4 pedals we have on our screen here, we have the DS2 Turbo Distortion, the JB2 Angry Driver, the OD2R Turbo Overdrive, and the SD2 Dual Overdrive. With 3 of these pedals, the DS2, the OD2R, and the SD2, they all work pretty much the same with the latching foot switch. What they're going to do is actually cycle between 2 different modes of distortion or overdrive sound. Now the JB2 Angry Driver is a completely different animal. You're actually going to use both the JB2 foot switch and your external foot switch to make different sounds throughout the modes. So look at this chart here. You can see depending on what mode you're on, your pedal switch and your foot switch are going to react in different ways. And looking at one of the older vintage style pedals, we have the GE10 graphic equalizer. You can use one FS-5L external foot switch to bypass the EQ settings into normal mode. Now moving on to the 500 series pedals from Boss. We have the DD500 digital delay, the MD500 modulation, the RV500 reverb, and the VE500 vocal performer. With the foot switch externally attached to these pedals, the controls are absolutely endless. There's so many functions you can change and just different stuff that you can do with it. There's way too much to actually list. So if you want to get into that, grab the manual and actually go through the list of different things and functions that you can do for each one of these pedals. It's amazing. Moving on now to the 20 series pedals, we have the DD20 digital delay. You can use the external control pedal to turn the effect on and off, to input the delay time with tap input, and to switch memories. Now taking a look at the Boss and Roland FC foot controllers. We have the FC50 foot controller and the FC200 foot controller. With the FC50, you can use up to 2 FS-5L external foot switches, which will allow you to control a connected MIDI instrument in real time with control change messages. With the FC200, you can use multiple FS-5L external foot switches to control a variety of features throughout the controller. Now let's take a look at the GR series from Roland. We have the GR200 polyphonic guitar synthesizer. You can use one FS-5L external foot switch to turn the compression function on and off. Now moving on to the GT Effects Processor series, we have the GT3 Guitar Effects Processor and the GT6 Guitar Effects Processor. With the GT3, you can use 2 different FS-5L external foot switches to control and assign manual on-off and tuner on-off. With the GT6, you can use 2 FS-5L external foot switches to control and assign manual on-off, tuner on-off, MIDI start-stop, and MMC start-stop. And last but not least, we have the GT6B Bass Effects Processor. You can use 2 FS-5L external foot switches to control and assign bypass on-off, patch select, MIDI start-stop, and MMC start and stop. Let's listen to what this pedal sounds like in action. So moving on now, we have the Boss FS-5U unlatching foot switch. Very much so like the 5L, just different color, no LED, still has an input jack and a polarity switch. With the polarity switch on this, it's very important to make sure that you're using the right setting for the right pedal. Depending on what pedal you're using, this can do the complete opposite of what you want it to do. So with regards to like the RC series, sometimes if you plug this in and you have it in the wrong way, you're actually not going to record the way that you're supposed to, or you won't, it'll stop it, or it will just delete all your stuff. So make sure that your polarity switch is in accordance with what it says in the Boss manual for that specific pedal that you're using. Now with a momentary foot switch, what this will do, unlike the latching foot switches, as your foot is on this pedal, it's being activated, and when you let go, it's not being activated. This is great for tap tempo, for delays out there. If you have a weird Boss effect that when you hold it down, crazy things happen, ambient noises or phase shifting or whatever works for that particular effect, this is the pedal that you're going to use, because the latching is not going to do that for you. So with that being said, let's look at all the different effects this pedal works for. I also want to note that when I start talking about using multiple foot switches, you will notice that most of what I'm talking about here only has one external foot switch jack. You will need to purchase one of these Roland PCS 31Ls. This is going to allow you to go from a TRS connection into a TS connection that has 2 ends. This is going to allow you to plug your TRS side, which is your stereo jack, into whatever unit that you're using, and then the 2 TS mono jacks are going to go into both of your FS-5U or 5L units. Alright, jumping back in now to the compact pedal series. We have the AW2 dynamic wah, the DD3T digital delay, the DD5 digital delay, the DD7 digital delay, the DD8 digital delay, and the PH3 phase shifter. So with all these pedals you have tap tempo capability, but if you have a DD8 you can put on a second switch there and it will allow you to do the twist sound function, which is a really cool effect. If you haven't heard it, you gotta check it out, it's pretty neat. Moving on now to our next set of compact pedals, we have the RC1 loop station, the RC2 loop station, the RC3 loop station, the RC5 loop station, the RE2 space echo, and the SL2 slicer. So with the RC1, 2, and 3 loop stations, I don't want to get too involved with what these pedals do, as they're pretty self-explanatory and it's all written up there. There's a few variations here and there, but they're pretty much the same. Now the RC5 loop station, that is a complete different animal, just like the JB2. But with this pedal, you can actually go into the display and select the exact function that you want. A list of functions is written on the screen in front of you. Moving on now to the RE2 Space Echo. This is going to allow you to do tap tempo or the twist function like we talked about earlier. And then last but not least, we have the SL2 Slicer. Now depending on where the variation knob is selected, you will have different ways that the pedals are going to react for your external foot switch. So if you have two FS-5Us, you want to put it on variation 1, which is going to allow you to do tap echo and momentary. If you only have one, put it on variation 2 or 3, where you can select either tap tempo or momentary. And looking at a vintage style Boss pedal, we have a GE10 graphic equalizer. You can use one FS-5U external foot switch to bypass the EQ setting into normal mode. Alright, now looking at Boss's 20s and 30s series pedals. First off the bat, we have the DD20 digital delay, the RC20 phrase recorder loop station, and the RC20 XL phrase recorder loop station. With the DD20 digital delay, you can use the external control pedal to turn the effect on and off, to input the delay time with tap input, and to switch memories. With the RC20 and 20XL, you can use the external control pedal to switch the phrase or to activate reverse playback. And last but not least out of these series, the RC30 loop station, you can use the external control pedal to switch phrases or tracks, or to turn on the loop effects on and off. Taking a look now at the Boss 200 and 300 series pedals, we have the DD200 digital delay, the EQ200 graphic equalizer, the IR200 amp and IR cabinet, and the MD200 modulation. Looking at the DD200 digital delay, the FS-5U foot switch can be used to tap input the delay time or switch memories. With the EQ200 graphic equalizer, the FS-5U foot switch can be used to switch memories or channels. With the IR200 amp and IR cabinet, the FS-5U foot switch can be used to switch the solo switch on-off or switch memories. And with the MD200 modulation, the FS-5U foot switch can be used to tap input the rate or switch memories. Moving on now, we have the DD200 hybrid drive, the RC10R rhythm loop station, the SY200 synthesizer, and the RE202 space echo. With the OD200, the FS-5U foot switch can be used to switch the booster on-off or switch memories. With the RC10R and SY200, the foot switch can be used to assign it to control a variety of different functions within the pedal depending on what you select, so check out your manual. And the RE202, using two foot switches, you can use these to switch between twist, warp, switch memories up and down, and so on. And looking at the Lonely 300 here, we have the SY300 guitar synthesizer. You can use two FS-5U foot switches to control a variety of functions like patch up and down, assign off and on, and much, much more. Moving on now to the 500 series Boss pedals, we have the DD500 digital delay, the MD500 modulation, the RV500 reverb, the RC500 loop station, and the VE500 vocal performer. The Boss FS-5U Momentary foot switch can control various parameters, so you have to get into each one of these manuals to actually see the amazing amount of capability and control that you can have just with using the external foot switch. Now let's get into some acoustic pedals. We have the AD10 acoustic preamp and the VE8 acoustic singer. You can use with the AD10 two FS-5U external foot switches to control a variety of functions, and with the VE8 acoustic singer you can use two FS-5U external foot switches to switch memories. Moving on now to some effects switching systems. So looking at the ES series, we have the ES5 effects switching system and the ES8 effects switching system. With both of these units, you can use multiple FS-5U external foot switches to control a variety of functions. Moving on now to the MS multi-effects switching systems. We have the MS3 multi-effects switcher. You can use multiple FS-5U foot switches to control a variety of functions. Looking at the FC series foot controllers, we have the FC50, FC200, and FC300. With the FC50 foot controller, you can use up to two FS-5U external foot switches to allow you to control a connected MIDI instrument in real time with control change messages. With the FC200 and FC300, you can use multiple FS-5U external foot switches to control a variety of features throughout the controllers. Now let's look at the Boss foot controllers that you can go out there. First one we're looking at is the FS-1WL wireless foot switch, the GA-FC foot controller, and the GA-FC-EX foot controller. All these pedals, depending on how many you want to use or what you want to use them for, there's a various amount of functions you can use with all these pedals using the FS-5U foot switch. Looking at the BE multiple effects series, we have the BE5M programmable multi-effects. You can use an FS-5U external foot switch to switch between patch groups. Looking at the GR guitar synthesizer series from Roland, we have the GR09 guitar synthesizer and GR30 guitar synthesizer. You can use two FS-5U external foot switches to control over switching patch banks in both of these units. Moving on now to the GR33 guitar synthesizer and the GR200 polyphonic guitar synthesizer. With the GR33 guitar synthesizer, you can use two FS-5U external foot switches to control switching patch banks, and with the GR200 polyphonic guitar synthesizer, you can use one FS-5U external foot switch to turn the compression function on and off. Now let's look at the GP and GT effects processing series. First page here we have the GP10 guitar processor and the GT1 guitar effects processor. The GP10 allows you to use two external foot switches to turn effects on and off, to input tap tempo, and much more. With the GT1 you can use two FS-5U external foot switches to assign a various amount of different functions. Looking at our next page here, we have the GT1B bass effects processor and the GT3 guitar effects processor. You can use two FS-5U external foot switches with the GT1B. You can use these foot switches to control various different functions throughout the pedal. With the GT3, you can use two FS-5U external foot switches to control and assign manual on and off and tuner on and off. Moving to our next page, we have the GT5 guitar effects processor and the GT6 guitar effects processor. With the GT5 you can use four FS-5U external foot switches to control tap tempo, feedback, vibrato, delay, hold, delay, SOS, synth hold, manual on off, and tuner on off. With the GT6 you can use two FS5 external foot switches to control and assign manual on off, tuner on off, MIDI start stop, and MMC start stop. Looking now, we have the GT6B bass effects processor and the GT8 guitar effects processor. With the GT6B, you can use two FS-5U external foot switches to control and assign bypass, on-off, patch select, MIDI start stop, and MMC start stop. With the GT8, you can use two FS-5U external foot switches to control and assign various functions. Looking now, we have the GT10 guitar effects processor and the GT10B bass effects processor. With the GT10, you can use two FS-5U external foot switches to control and assign various functions, as well as do the exact same on the GT10B bass effects processor. Moving on now to the GT100 guitar effects processor and the GT1000 guitar effects processor. With the GT100, you can use two FS-5U external foot switches to control and assign various functions, as well as do the exact same thing with the GT1000 guitar effects processor. And last but not least, with the 1000 series, we have the GT1000 core guitar effects processor. You can use four FS-5U external foot switches to control and assign various functions. Moving on now to the GX effects processor series. We have the GX100 guitar effects processor. You can use two FS-5U external foot switches to control various parameters of this pedal. Now looking at some of the pedals that most people here would be very familiar with, we have the ME Multi-Effects series. Looking at our first page, we have the ME5 Guitar Multiple Effects, as well as the ME6 Guitar Multiple Effects. With the ME5, you can use two FS-5U external foot switches to engage manual play mode and change group numbers. With the ME6, you can use two FS-5U external foot switches to engage manual mode on-off and bypass on-off. Looking at the ME6B bass multiple effects unit, as well as the ME8 guitar multiple effects. With the ME6B, you can use two FS-5U external foot switches to engage manual mode on-off and bypass on-off. With the ME8, you can use three FS-5U external foot switches to engage manual mode on-off, tuner mode, and tap tempo. Moving on now to the ME8B bass multiple effects and the ME10 guitar multiple effects. With the ME8B, you can use three FS-5U external foot switches to engage manual mode on-off, tuner mode, and tap tempo. With the ME10, you can use three FS-5U external foot switches to engage manual mode on-off, tuner mode, and bypass on-off. Continuing on now, we have the MEX expandable multiple effects and the ME20 guitar multiple effects. You can use three FS-5U external foot switches to engage manual mode on-off, tuner mode, and tap tempo. With the ME20, you can use two FS-5U external foot switches to engage in manual mode, switches the OD to distortion, the solo on and off, and bypass, as well as tuner on and off. In memory mode, you can bank up or down. Now climbing the ladder a little bit higher, we got the ME20B bass multiple effects and the ME50 guitar multiple effects. With the ME20B, you can use two FS-5U external foot switches to engage in manual mode. We'll switch the OD to distortion, solo on and off, bypass, or tuner on and off. In memory mode, you can bank up or down. With the ME50, you can use two FS-5U external foot switches to tone modify on-off. The other turns the compressor on and off. In memory mode, the bank switching function is enabled. As we're still climbing now, we have the ME50B bass multiple effects and the ME70 guitar multiple effects. The ME50B, you can use two FS-5U external foot switches to engage the compressor limiter on-off and the other as a delay modulation tap tempo. With the ME70, you can use two FS-5U external foot switches to bank switching function in memory mode or engage reverb on-off, preamp on-off in manual mode. Alright, now that we're done the ME series, let's look at the RC loop station floorboards that you can use these pedals with. So first we have the RC50 loop station, the RC300 loop station, the RC600 loop station. With the 50 and 300, you can plug up to four FS-5U foot switches and change a variety of functions. The RC600 can plug up to two FS-5U foot switching and change a variety of different functions. Now looking at the V Guitar System series from Roland. We have the VG8EX V Guitar System and the VG88 V Guitar System. With the VG8 and VG8EX, you can use two FS-5U external foot switches to open the edit menu screen and page through it. With the VG88, you can use two FS-5U external foot switches to assign functions, tuner on-off, tap tempo, assign front or rear, Cosm guitar pickups. So as you can see, this foot switch has way more uses than what the latching foot switch, as we've shown before, and some of the effects and units that you can use that with. Now let's look at some of the capabilities using some of the pedals I just showed you of what this thing can do. So last but not least, in each one of these boxes, they come with these little sticker pads. These sticker pads go from 0 to 9 and A to J to help you organize your pedal if you choose to. They're a nice fluorescent color, so they really show up on top of these black plastic pieces. Also, a really cool feature of these pedals, and this is featured on the FS-6, but not the FS-7, so keep that in mind. If you have an FS-7, it's not going to work with these. But if you have both of these and you want to kind of keep them together, there's these little tracks here at the bottom that you just slip them in, and then it becomes one tight pedal. So I hope I'm going to help you distinguish if this is the pedal that's right for you or not, or pedals that are right for you or not. Until next time, I'm Kevin of Tricro Studios. Take care.